ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the study of the Great Master written by Sharda Nandji Maharaj. We were studying the chapter Vaishnava Charan and Gauri. Vaishnava Charan and Gauri. Yesterday, or the last class, we had seen though Sri Ramakrishna, after so much of tapasya, spiritual practices for more than 12 years, he had become very subtle and soft. So his digestion also had weakened. So it was but natural. Ramakrishna could not take spicy food or very normal food. It should be diet. It was made very simple by Sharda Devi and it was given in the form of diet. But now that Sri Ramakrishna, in some special mood, when either the Divine Mother or the universal I, Gadadhara Vishnu, could manifest in his body in Samadhi, he could consume so much of food, the food which 4 or 5 people or 10 people could eat himself, and there would be no indigestion or even any problem, stomach problem. So we saw such happenings, and also it is recorded in the scriptures that many saints, many avatar purushas, such phenomena would also happen. So now let us go and study some other aspects of Sri Ramakrishna's life in this chapter Vaishnava Charan and Gauri, where Shardanandaji Maharaj wants to explain many things about such phenomena or events. Many such events may be mentioned. The powerful waves of spiritual emotions produce such great changes in the master's body that on those occasions he seemed to be a different person, and his behavior, his bodily movements, eating, drinking, etc., all his behavior, all assumed a different nature as it were. Yet, on account of that supranormal behavior, no disturbance was observed in his body at the end of those spiritual moods. The mind residing within is making and unmaking our gross bodies. The mind, which is that mind residing within, is making and unmaking our gross bodies and fashioning it anew, is a fact that is accepted theoretically, but it is not known how this is affected. So many are skeptical about it, but these incidents, rather too common in Sri Ramakrishna's life, are proofs thereof. Some say that it was from Bhairavi Brahmani that Mathur Babu came to know about Vaishnava Charan, the great scholar and also a spiritual aspirant. Mathuranath therefore sent him an invitation to come to Dakshineshwar and advise him whether there was an element of physical ailment in Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual states. Anyway, Vaishnavacharan came to Dakshineshwar shortly afterwards. We can infer that a small meeting of scholars was arranged on that occasion. For a few devout aspirants and pandits must have come as usual with Vaishnavacharana, and learned Brahmani and Mathur Babu's party were also there to verify. As a subject of discussion, they had the ascertainment of the master's spiritual condition. Hence, we call it a meeting. The discussion started. The Bhairavi Brahmani described Sri Ramakrishna's state as she saw it with her own eyes and she had heard about it from people around. And comparing Sri Ramakrishna's present state with what was recorded in the scriptures as experiences of the ancient teachers of the devotional path, she gave her opinion that that is Sri Ramakrishna's, was the same state as those given in the scriptures. Addressing Vaishnav Charan, she said to him, if you hold a different opinion about this subject, please explain to me why you do so. Just as a mother stands with the pride of heroine to protect her child, the Bhairavi Brahmani, as if strengthened with some divine power, came forward to support the Sri Ramakrishna's case. And what was the reaction of Sri Ramakrishna? The cause of assemblage of all those august personalities? We can visualize the scene, quite unconcerned and smiling and enjoying the bliss of self. He must have been sitting in the midst of the people carrying on discussions, sometimes putting into his mouth a few grains of aniseed or cubex from the small bag near him and listening to their conversation as if it was about someone else, and at other times touching the person of Vaishnavacharan to draw his attention to what he had to narrate about his own condition and saying, look here, it sometimes happens like this. Some are of the opinion that with the help of the subtle insight born of his sadhana, that is, Vaishnavacharan himself was a spiritual, not only a just scholar, Pandit, but he was also a spiritual aspirant who had gone forward in spiritual life. So, with the help of the subtle insight born of sadhana, spiritual practices, Vaishnavacharan came to know the moment he saw Sri Ramakrishna, that Sri Ramakrishna was a great soul. He was not an ordinary man. But that apart, we were told by Sri Ramakrishna himself that he had heard and heartily approved whatever the Bhairavi Brahmani said about Sri Ramakrishna's condition. Not only that, Vaishnavacharan remarked with amazement that all the signs of the 19 kinds of spiritual moods in the Vaishnava scriptures, when you have the love of God, the devotion, come up to the highest level, that is called the bhava, mahabhava, in that the physical symptoms which will be shown at that time are 19 in numbers. So Vaishnavacharan, noticing all these things, he was well read in the scriptures, the Mahabhava of Radharani, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and other great Vaishnava acharyas in spiritual life, in the love of Lord Krishna. What were the physical symptoms which had manifested in themselves? So those 19 symptoms of the Mahabhava could be seen here. So Vaishnavacharan remarked with amazement with all the signs of the 19 kinds of spiritual moods, the coexistence of which has been called in the devotional scriptures, especially the Vaishnava scriptures, as the Mahabhava, the great spiritual mood, the great devotional mood, and observed only in the lives of Sri Radharani, manifested in the life of Sri Radharani, the embodiment of spiritual moods, and also in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, were seen manifested in the person of Sri Ramakrishna too. If at all, the Mahabhava, all that spiritual moods, the ordinary people, when having the love of God, we can see the manifestation of so many different kinds of the devotional moods manifested in them, but they are in an ordinary level. But to aspirants like Radharani, those features, those external expressions were in the highest form, or you can say they had manifested in their perfection, complete perfection. So that could be seen in some of the Vaishnava Acharyas. So that was the standard with which the Vaishnava Acharyas could measure the future great saints. Now, Vaishnava Charan saw that all these Mahabhava, the spiritual moods, the spiritual expressions manifested in Sri Ramakrishna in perfection, so that surprised him. That could be heard. Such Mahabhava was observed only in the lives of Sri Radharani. The spiritual embodiment of spiritual moods, and also in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He could see all of them were manifested in Sri Ramakrishna. If at all, the Mahabhava manifested a little, even a little, in an ordinary living being like us, due to unprecedented good fortune, only 2 or 3 of these 19 moods could find expression in them. No jiva, that is living being, ordinary living being like us, in the past could sustain. They couldn't sustain because they didn't have sufficient inner strength. So the ordinary living being couldn't sustain the tremendous impact of all the 19 expression of that spiritual mood. No jiva in the future too will be aiming to the scriptures. Mathur and the other present were altogether dumbfounded to hear the words of Vaishnava Charana. And the master also said that Mathur, in joy and astonishment, he exclaimed, "Ah, what does he say? After all, I am glad to be assured that it is not a disease. Which Sri Ramakrishna is having is not a disease. Vaishnava Charan, the great scholar, whatever he says is to be celebrated. The above mentioned view of Vaishnava Charan about Sri Ramakrishna was not mere verbal, for even afterwards he held Sri Ramakrishna in high regard and had genuine devotion to him. He started developing devotion to Sri Ramakrishna. He started developing proximity and so much of respect to Sri Ramakrishna. So the above mentioned view of Vaishnava Charan about Sri Ramakrishna was not merely verbal, for even afterwards he held Sri Ramakrishna in a very high regard and had genuine devotion to him. From that time on, Vaishnava Charan came very often to Dakshineshwar for the purpose of enjoying the bliss of Sri Ramakrishna's divine company, and sought his opinion on his own sadhanas of an esoteric type, which he confided to him. Sometimes he took him by way of trip to fellow devotees of his sect, treading the same path, so that they also might be acquainted with Sri Ramakrishna and be blessed like himself. So Vaishnava Charan would not only come and meet Sri Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar, he would also make arrangement so that he could take Sri Ramakrishna with him to meet his fellow spiritual aspirants who were going forward in their particular sect, so that they also will get the company, holy company of Sri Ramakrishna and be benefited spiritually. Now, let us see how could Vaishnava Charan develop his such great devotion towards Sri Ramakrishna. Now, the godlike Sri Ramakrishna master, the picture of immaculate purity, got the opportunity to understand that if one practices as sadhana actions blameworthy and condemnable in ordinary eyes, cherishing in one's heart the sure and sincere conviction that one is doing it for the realization of the divine Lord. One, instead of meeting with downfall on his account, became gradually fit for renunciation and self control, goes forward on the path of religion, and attains devotion to God. But when at first he heard of those practices and saw a little of them with his own eyes, there arose in his mind, we were told many a times by Master Sri Ramakrishna himself, such ideas as these people talk tall. Why do they at the same time indulge in such low practices? And again, we were told by Sri Ramakrishna himself that he changed his opinion at last, for he saw that those amongst them who were sincere and had faith in God made spiritual progress. In order to remove our hatred for the followers of such paths and sect, Sri Ramakrishna expressed to us his conviction about them thus: Ah, why should you indulge in hatred? Know that that is also one of the paths, but that is a dirty one. Just as there are several doors, the main gate, the back door, and the one for the sweeper to enter the house in order to clean the dirt there, so also know that there are several approaches to the mansion of God, and that this also is one, though an unclean way. Through whatever door people may enter the house, they reach the goal all right. Still, are you to act like them or mix with them? No, you should not. But you must not also entertain any hatred for such paths. Does the human mind, so fully worldly desires, adopt the path of renunciation easily? Is it so easy for everyone to follow this universal path of renunciation, or the Rajamarga, the highway, the freeway? So the path of renunciation so easily? Is it easy for everybody? Because so much of desires are there in everybody's mind. It's not so easy to take up this path of renunciation. Does it care to be absolutely pure and sincere in its quest for God? It wants generally to cling to some impurity in purity. Even when it renounces lust and gold, it is pleased with whatever smells of them. The books on the method of performing worship enjoys that enjoins that one should worship the Divine Mother with absolute purity of mind, but the next moment prescribe the singing of hideous, lustful songs for her satisfaction. This is not something to be wondered at or condemned. It only shows how adamantine is the chain of lust and gold with which the human mind is bound by Mahamaya, the mistress of countless world systems. It becomes clear too that it is impossible for a living being, Jiva, to attain liberation if she does not remove this bondage by her grace. It becomes evident that the path along which she is helping a particular person to go forward towards liberation is beyond human understanding. And when we make a minute and comparative study of the trends and tendencies of our minds on the one hand, and the unique mystery, the unique mystery of Sri Ramakrishna's life on the other, it will become abundantly clear how he transcends humanity and represents a type rarely seen in this world, and how he was sojourning in this sordid world of ours out of his own will in play of comparison for us, remaining always an emperor of the realm of knowledge in the eyes of knowing ones, but humbler than the humblest and lowlier than the lowliest to the superficial eyes of ignorant men. So you could see these contrasting qualities in Sri Ramakrishna, just like it is told in some of the scriptures that you should be having this combination of character, the strongest, like that of the diamond, and softest, like that of the flower. Kusumadapi mruduni, katorani vajradapi katorani. Likewise, so many contrasting characters could be seen in Sri Ramakrishna. He was remaining always as an emperor of the realm of knowledge in the eyes of the knowing ones. But he was humbler than the humblest. He was humbler than the humblest and lowlier than the lowliest to the superficial eyes of ignorant men. So he had gained knowledge so much so that he could be the emperor of all the people who had knowledge, just like Ganpati. So he was the Gananantva Ganapatigam Havamahe, Kaving Kavinam. So he was the topmost among the knower of Brahman. Likewise, Sri Ramakrishna, when the great scholars would come, would be the topmost man of knowledge. But at the same time, when people of no education, the lowly, the lowest, the ordinary people came, he was humbler than the humblest and lowlier than the lowliest to the superficial eyes of the ignorant men. How could these two opposing features exist in one person? In the Karmakanda, the work portion of the Vedas, full of descriptions of sacrifices, oblations, etc., that were performed in the Vedic age, bhoga, that is enjoyment, the sensual enjoyments of the objects of the senses like sight, it's for the eyes, the sight, the taste for the tongue, and the rest, the ears and the skin, and these are all the five, the nose, the five sense organs. So they are called the sight and taste and the rest, in and through a system of worship of gods, came to be recognized as the aim of human life. We'll go back again and see what Shardanandaji is telling, that were performed in the Vedic age, the sacrifices, the havan, the home, oblations, in the Karmakanda, there was a mixture of bhoga, enjoyment of the objects of the senses like sight, taste, etc., and the rest in and through the system of worship of gods, that is combination of yoga and bhoga, the highest spiritual life as well as the enjoyment of the sense objects, they were combined in the Vedas. So they were people were given because they knew that the people are weak by nature, so they allowed to enjoy little sensual enjoyments too. So the combination were given. What were they? Yoga and bhoga. So if you go to some of the temples, you see, especially some of the Vaishnava temples, on the top of the hill there will be Yoga Narasimha. If you come down at the bottom of the hill, there will be Bhoga Narasimha. So there will be a lot of bhoga enjoyments to this Narasimha who is at the bottom. So any other Narayana, Bhoga Narayana or Yoga Narayana, whatever, you see at the lower end below the mountain or the hillock, the Bhoga Narasimha or Bhoga Narayana, lot of seva will be given in the form of different services. But the Bhoga, Yoga Narasimha who is at the top, it's very difficult for them to go there. Very less people go there. Purahits also with great difficulty, the priests go there, do very little seva to the Lord. So he doesn't get many things in the form of services. So he is called Yoga Narasimha or Yoga Narayana. But whereas the Narasimha or Narayana who is at the bottom of the hillock, lot of people come. So there will be a lot of things given to the Lord. So you can see Yoga Narasimha and Bhoga Narasimha. So Yoga and Bhoga were given in the Karma Kanda in the beginning portion of the Vedas to keep in view the weakness of human mind, to make them strong and gradually take them up step by step to the higher realm of the yoga. So that's why we can see in the Vedic age, bhoga or enjoyment of the objects of the senses like sight, taste, and the rest, in and through a system of worship of gods, came to be recognized as the aim of human life when the human mind became freed from desire to some extent by continued observance of these Vedic rites. Worship of God with pure devotion, as recommended in the Upanishad, was adopted by aspirants for the attainment of the goal of life. But in the Buddhistic age, what happened during Buddhistic age? A totally different outlook and way of life came to prevail. After Buddhism came to India, a totally different outlook and way of life came to prevail without any consideration of competency. So you need competency. You cannot take up the fish, you cannot take up the monkey, you cannot take up the deers, the tortoise, frog, and ask them to have a competition of climbing the tree. So you should have been thinking the competency of these animals. For the fish and the aquatic animal, it should be swimming in the water. For the monkeys and other things which are living on the tree, it is the competition of climbing the tree. For the animals which run on the land, that should be the competition. You cannot give the different things. So you have to see the competency of each individual. That's what is shown here without any consideration of competency. In Buddhism, what was done? A system of spiritual discipline suited for ascetics, which was meant for the sannyasins, which were meant for the highest renunciates. So that high competency or the high monastic rules and disciplines suited for only ascetics free from all worldly desires and dwelling in the forests and caves, that was preached to all and sundry, to all the common people too. However much they might be burning with desire for worldly enjoyment, those people may be having so much of worldly desires, they were given the highest path of renunciation, which is meant for the ascetics. So what could they do? What happened then? The then political machinery of the state also helped the attempt of Buddhistic monks to give all these highest ascetic disciplines to very ordinary people. The Vedic sacrificial religion permitted controlled enjoyment of the senses to men who were not fit for total renunciation, so that they might gradually be brought up that way of life with their spiritual development. When the Vedic rituals, which were the outward forms of their outlook, when the Vedic rituals, the Homa, Havana, which are being done according to the Vedic scriptures, which were the outward forms of this outlook, were destroyed by the preaching of Buddhistic monks, now they reappeared. They reappeared in the form of secret tantric sadhanas. So now all these tantric sadhana, they came up as a counterpart when the Buddhistic monks, during the reign of Buddhism, with the help of the rulers, they put forth the ascetic practices of the sannyasins to the common people. When the common people couldn't follow these all high things, so daytime, morning time, they were all great people with all that ascetic practices. But when they're not seen, they had so much of desires, they wanted to enjoy so many things. So all the Vedic practices earlier, which were giving an allowance for all the people to enjoy a little yoga and bhoga, now reappeared in the form of tantras because of the Buddhistic suppression, and they were forcibly giving these ascetic practices to all and sundry without looking at the competency. So now we can see the origin. They all these Vedic practices like Homa Havana for the sake of fulfilling their desires with a mixture of yoga and bhoga, they reappeared in the form of secret tantric sadhanas. Now you can see the origin of tantra. You might have understood that so many people were asking me question about this tantras. Now you can see what was the reason for the origin of the tantric practices. For you to understand it, I will go back again and tell you. The Vedic sacrificial religion permitted control enjoyment of the senses to the human beings were not fit for total renunciation. They had desire, so they were allowed to enjoy little bhoga with the guidance of righteousness, dharma, scriptures, and also keeping mukti, the highest liberation in view. So they were allowed to enjoy this world too, little by little, under the control of the righteousness, dharma, to the men who were not fit for total renunciation, so that they might gradually be brought up to that way of life with their spiritual development. Now, when the Vedic rituals, which were the outward forms of this outlook, were destroyed totally by the preachings of Buddhistic monks, now what could the common people do? Can they undergo this rigorous training of the ascetics and the monks? They have so much of desire within. So the all these practices of the Vedas, which gave consideration to the weaknesses of the mind of the common man, they reappeared in the forms of secret tantric sadhanas practiced at the dead of the night in solitary and uncanny places like the burning grounds, the cremation grounds, etc. Seeing the Vedic sacrifices becoming ineffective and obsolete, the great Yogi Maheshwara, the Tantra says, infused life into them and revealed them in the different form as tantras. So, what is the word of the scriptures? What are the tantras telling? Seeing the Vedic sacrifices during the time of the Buddhistic rule becoming ineffective and obsolete, the great Yogi Maheshwara, that is Lord Shiva, the tantras say, infused life into the tantras and reveal them in a different form. Infused life, that is whatever the you could find in Vedas, infused life into them and reveal them in a different form as tantras. So you can see the origin of tantras. It's so clear. I think people who had asked me some question about tantra, why tantra came up, it was because the monastics, the ascetic practices for the renunciates only, the highest renunciation was given to all and sundry by the Buddhistic monks of that period by the help of the rulers of that period. So the kings helped them to do that. So the ordinary people had to obey, they had to follow, they had no other choice. But they had that intense desire in their heart. Daytime, yes, they would follow all these ascetic rule. What will they do in the night time? They had these desires intensely coming up. So they started practicing so many things, uncanny things, and escaping to the cremation ground where nobody would be there. So all the things started, all these practices. So these are the tantras. The whole thing came back, reappeared, the Homa, Havana, and other things of the Vedic period, where they were given little choice to enjoy this world. Also have yoga, came up, came back. So what is the way by which Tantra itself is describing about the origin of itself, seeing the Vedic sacrifices becoming ineffective and obsolete, the great Yogi Maheshwara, Lord Shiva, the Tantras say, infused life into them and revealed them in a different form as Tantras. There is indeed a great truth hidden in this tradition. For in the Tantras, as in the portion of the Vedas dealing with the sacrifices, like the Homa, Havan, and other things, a union of bhoga or worldly enjoyments with yoga, a union of bhoga and yoga or spiritual contemplation is distinctly perceptible. But while in the Vedas, the karmas inculcated by them are never combined with the non-dual knowledge of the Upanishadic teachings. Again, I will tell the difference. While in the Vedas, the karmas inculcated by the Vedic practices, the Havan, the Homa, and other things which are given as practices, they never combined with the non-dual knowledge of Advaita of the Vedanta or the Upanishads. But what is the speciality of Tantra? Each tantric rite or ceremony which have come as an offshoot of the suppression of Vedic practices during the Buddhistic period. Each tantric rite, now people who had asked the question about tantras have to note very important thing told by Shardanandaji Maharaj about the origin of tantras. The karmas, while in the Vedas, the karmas inculcated by the Vedas in the form of Havan, the fire sacrifice, Homa, Yaga, Yagna, never combined in themselves with the non-dual knowledge, the highest non-dual knowledge of the Advaita monoism of the Upanishad. But in every and each tantric rites, but in each and every tantric rites or ceremony is intimately associated with the supreme knowledge of the Upanishad. So each and every tantric practices or rites or ceremony is intimately associated with that supreme knowledge of the monoism, the highest Vedantic knowledge. For example, you sit to worship a particular deity. First of all, you are to think that you raise the Kundalini. We do that in our puja practices. You raise the Kundalini, the coiled up power, to the 1,000-petal lotus in the head and think of your existence in a non-dual state with Brahman. Then you are to think that you become separate from Brahman and assume the nature of the living Jiva again, and that the light of Brahman becomes condensed, so to say, and manifests itself in the form of the deity to be worshipped. So that is how we take it from our own heart, the deity who is condensed to form your Ishta Devata, and then place him in front of you in the form of an Shivalinga or Saligrama or the image, and then worship. So that is the practice you can see in the pujas, the tantric pujas. Then you are to think that you become separate from that Parabrahma, the highest, and assume the nature of the living being Jiva again, and that the light of Brahman becomes condensed, so to say, and manifests itself in the form of the deity, Ishtadevata, to be worshipped. You then bring the deity out from within you, and begin to worship him. Ah, what a fine method is this attempt at meditation, becoming one with God in love, in bhakti, and then worshipping him. Of course, it is perhaps only one advanced worshipper among 1,000 who can properly perform this meditation. But all can at least make an attempt, which in itself is of immense benefit to them. For by continually attempting it, they are sure to advance gradually. Thus, by combining the ideas of non-duality, that is the monoistic Advaita, with all its rituals, the Tantras remind the aspirant always of the ultimate aim of spiritual life. So, you can see what is Tantra. So, thus, by combining the idea of the highest non-duality of the Upanishad with all its rituals, the Tantras remind the aspirant always of the ultimate aim of spiritual life. Herein lies the novelty of the tantric disciplines as distinguished from the Vedic rituals. And it is for this reason that it has such a great hold and appeal over the common masses and people of India in general. So now we got a clear picture of what tantras are. Another novelty of the tantras is the preaching of the motherhood of Mahamaya. Now, one more thing which is combined with the highest non-dualistic idea in every ritual of the Parabrahma. Another important feature of tantras are, another novelty of the tantric practices or tantra is the preaching of the motherhood of Mahamaya. preaching the motherhood of Mahamaya, the cause of the universe, as a result of which a pure, sacred mental attitude towards every feminine form is induced. Again, another special feature of Tantras is told by our great Shardanandaji Maharaj. And what is that? Another novelty of the Tantras is the preaching of motherhood of Mahamaya, the center of the universe, the cause of the universe, as a result of which a pure, sacred mental attitudes towards every feminine form. Because of this attitude of the Tantras, the novelty of the Tantra is the preaching of the motherhood of Mahamaya, which is the cause of universe, as a result of which we all of us get a pure, sacred mental attitude towards all the female living beings, towards every feminine form as induced. So this this develops the feeling of pure, feminine, motherly attitude towards all the female beings. So you can see Tantra having another novelty, which Shardanandaji Maharaj is mentioning. Another novelty of the Tantras is the preaching of the motherhood of Mahamaya, the cause of the universe, as a result of which a pure, sacred mental attitude towards every feminine form is induced. Examine the Vedas and the Puranas, you will not meet with this idea so uniformly and impressively as in the Tantras. So now Shardanandaji Maharaj is challenging all of us. Go and study the Vedas, Vedic literature. Go and study the Puranas, which are based on the Vedas. You will examine the Vedas and the Puranas. You will not meet with this idea, the combination of the highest Advaitic monoism with every ritual, and also the novel idea of the Tantras preaching the motherhood of Mahamaya, the cause of the universe, as a result of which a pure, sacred mental attitude towards every woman is induced. So he's challenging, examine all the Vedas and Puranas, you will not meet with this idea so uniformly. In Vedas and Puranas, it may be here and there, the ideas in the seed form, but you cannot meet with this idea so uniformly and impressively as in the Tantras. The rudiments of the worship of the female body are, however, met with in the Samhita portion of the Vedas. In the Samhita portion of the Vedas, somewhere here and there, the rudiments of worship of the feminine body are met with in the Samhita portion of the Vedas. They especially prescribed that it should be looked upon as pure, and that at the time of marriage, gods should be worshipped in it by the mantras such as conceive, O one, Uma, possessing the white crescent of the moon, etc., so that the bride might conceive a beautiful child full of vitality. But let no one think on this account that the worship of the male and female bodies are prevalent in India from the Vedic times. So a warning is given by Shardanandaji Maharaj, but let no one think on this account that the worship of the male and female bodies are prevalent in India from the Vedic times. History has proved that this worship in a gross form was at first extant among the Sumers of the Babylon. So in history, you can see that this type of worship was prevalent in the Sumers of the Babylonian civilization. History has proved that in this worship in a gross form of the organs of the male and female was first extant amongst the Sumers of the Babylonian civilization. Where was the Babylonian civilization? At present, it is the Iraq in the Middle East, near Arabia, and cognate people. Just as, on the one hand, the Tantras of India united in each of its ceremonies the spirit of work and knowledge portions of the Vedas. So now you can see what the Tantras did was, the Tantras, just on the one hand, the Tantras of India united, combined in each of its ceremonies. In every ritual of it, it combined the spirit of the work, Karma Yoga, and knowledge, Gnana Yoga, knowledge portions of the Vedas, so on. So, on the other hand, finding that the spiritual progress of certain class of people with peculiar tendencies would be easy through the worship of the female forms, it reverted to a great extent to a gross form of such worship, combining it with the high spiritual ideas of the Vedas. The Tantras that thus made the worship also a part of itself. The Tantric Virachara. The Tantric Virachara, the hero mode of worship, seems to have originated in this way. And what is this Vira Bhava or Virachara? This mode of Tantra, just like in the Madhura Bhava of Vaishnavas, we consider that even a male can assume a female form and see God as the husband or the lover or the spouse and move forward in spiritual life, establishing relationship with God as husband. But here in the Virachara, a man or a woman can assume the manly attitude like a Vira and establish relationship with God as a woman. That attitude of Madhura Bhava, where you can consider God as wife and the aspirant as a husband. That idea is in the Tantra, it is found in the Tantras, and that is called Virachara. The Tantric Virachara, the hero mode of worship, seem to have originated in this way. The Kaula teachers who practiced the Tantras rightly understood that men ever eager to enjoy pleasures, men or women ever eager to enjoy pleasures, could not forego the gross sights, tastes, etc. altogether. But if they could somehow generate in those persons a genuine reverence for the objects of enjoyments, they were certain to develop, on the strength of that reverence, spiritual qualities like self-control, etc. In course of time, though they might indulge for some time in the pleasure thereof, maybe to some excess in rare cases, that was why they preach the body of woman are veritable holy places of pilgrimage. One should give up looking upon woman as human beings and always regard them as the Devi herself, knowing that it is a special manifestation of the mother of the universe. One should always have devotion to and reverence for every female figure. One should sip a little of the water in which the mother or the female form as the woman has dipped her toe. One should not condemn a woman or beat her, even through inadvertence. These were all the rules given there in the Tantras. So we read such passages as these in Tantric literature. In her, a woman's body, a great lady, there exists all places of pilgrimage. Chapter 14, Purascharanolasa Tantra. Purascharanolasa Tantra, it is mentioned, in her, a woman's body, a great lady, there exists the place of pilgrimages. A man who looks upon woman as a human being, O thou of the best countenance, can have no perfection. What is the Tantra telling? A man who looks upon the woman as a human being, O thou of the best countenance, can have no perfection. Though he may repeat mantras, he meets with the contrary results. This is given in chapter 2, Uttara Tantra. A man who drinks with devotion a little of the water into which a woman has dipped her toe or eats the leavings of the food in her plate is sure to have uninterrupted success. Nigama Kalpadruma. Women are the gods, they are sacred, and they are the ornaments of the society. One should never hate, condemn, or beat them. Chapter 5th, Mundamala Tantra. But of what avail were all these? Eventually, there came a time for the tantric sadhakas when they gave up the ideal of realizing the knowledge of God and applied their minds to the attainment of only miraculous powers. They forgot about realization of God. Now they were much worried about only developing miraculous power. So they forgot all these higher ideals. It was during this period that various kinds of unnatural sadhanas, what we see now as Vamachara. So there are two divisions, the Uttarachara and Vamachara. The left-hander practices Vamachara, that is the one which everybody abhors. It was during this period that various kinds of unnatural spiritual practices, sadhanas, and the worship of ghosts, ghouls, and hobgoblins, the demigods, etc., entered into the body of the tantras because now they were interested only in miraculous powers, mysticism, and the worship of the ghosts, ghouls, demigods, entered into the body of tantras and converted it into the present form. This is why the two broad strata, the good and the bad, the high and the low, the pure and the impure, are met with in each tantra with their distinctiveness. Sadhanas of the lowest stratum are sometimes seen inserted into the worship of the highest, and everyone now selects from the tantras that kind of sadhanas which suits his own nature. There appears another change in the tantric sadhana on the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, thinking that the thread of dualism among the masses would be beneficial. He and his immediate successors propagated among them the tantric mantras and outward worship only, leaving out to a great extent the tantric practices leading to the attitude of non-duality. They also introduced a novel method into the above worship. They taught that the deity, the object of worship, should be served by one as one wished oneself to be served. Again, I will read it. They taught that the deity, the object of worship, should be served by one as one wished oneself to be served. The tantric deities are conceived as purifying by mere sights and roots. The tantric deities are conceived as purifying by mere sight, the roots, other footsteps offered to them by the worshipper. The general belief is that these offered articles taken by the aspirants increase their spiritual inclination instead of their animal propensities of lust, anger, etc. According to the process newly started by the Vaishnava teachers like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers, on the other hand, the belief gained currency that the deities took subtle part of those offerings, and sometimes they took even gross parts in accordance with the devotional ardor and the earnestness of the devotee. Many other changes were also introduced by the Vaishnava teachers into their mode of worship. Chief amongst them was the preeminence they gave to the tantric mode of worship called Pashvachara. What is this Pashvachara? Which favored external cleanliness. Pashvachara comes from the word Pashu, that is animal, plus Achara, that is practice. Pashu ordinarily means an animal, but in the Tantra it means Jiva, any living being. Hence, Pashvachara is not anything censurable. It simply means the rites and ceremonies of those who still consider themselves as Jivas and not have attained oneness with Shiva. who is the Pashupati, the Lord of the Jivas. As long as man regards himself a Jiva, he must keep an eye on these external practices like cleanliness, purity of food, etc. Hence, in Pashvachara, stress is laid on these external things. So, what does this Pashvachara prescribe? The external cleanliness and other things. It favors external cleanliness. They preach to the people in general that by remaining absolutely clean in thought, in word, and in deed, by keeping external cleanliness not only at the level of the body but at the level of the thought, absolutely clean in thought, word, and deed, in all our actions, and knowing that the name itself was Brahman, the name of the deity, the mantra, the japa which we do is itself the highest godhead, the jivas would attain the beatific vision through the constant repetition of the name of the divine Lord, as proclaimed in the percept. Success is achieved through japa, japat siddhihi, japa and japa alone, by taking the name of the Lord, that can give the external purity in thought, word, and deed, and taking the name of the Lord. Success is achieved through japa and japa alone. That is the repeating the name of the Lord. But the effort of these early teachers were all in vain. Very shortly after their time, the human mind, full of desire, they cannot keep up to the highest ideals. They will pull down the human nature. The human being mind is always, because of the impurity and desires, weakened. It will pull down the higher ideal to their level. So, but the effort of these early teachers were all in vain. Very shortly after their time, the human mind, full of desires, introduced impure ideas into the pure process of worship prescribed by them. Man discarded the subtle ideas and took only the gross objects, instead of cultivating the heartfelt attraction which a woman has for the paramour and directing it towards God. He went the length of taking a mistress himself. Thus he introduced bhoga, worldly enjoyment, into the pure process of yoga or union with God, and brought it down to the level of his natural inclination to a certain extent. And what else can he do? For he is unable to live such a pure life. It is only a combination of yoga and bhoga that he can assimilate. He wants to realize spirituality by simultaneously covets the enjoyments of the sight, taste, etc. And this was why there arose in the Vaishnavas community worship and secret sadhana according to the doctrine of Karta Bhaja, alus, bowls, darvesas, signs, and so on. Therefore, at the root of all these is seen the current of very ancient Vedic karmas, that combination of yoga and bhoga, along with it a tendency to combine each action with a non-dual knowledge, a process introduced by the Tantric Kaula teachers, is also seen. The reader will easily grasp the foregoing reflection if we give a brief exposition of the idea of the Karta Bhaja sects, the Vaishnava sects, which had combined this Vedic and Tantric practices into this Vaishnavism. So, a brief exposition of the ideas of the Karta Bhajas and allied communities. What are the allied communities? Shardanandaji told about that. What are they? The Karta Bhajas, alus, bowls, darvesas, signs, and so on. So now the reader will easily grasp the foregoing reflections if we give a brief exposition of the ideas of the Karta Bhajas and allied communities regarding topics like God, liberation and self-control, renunciation and bhakti, love of God. Speaking of these communities, Sri Ramakrishna told us many times many things about them at different times. Their teachings are recorded in verses, clothed in simple language. The reader will realize when he hears them how far those verses help the ordinary people in understanding the ideas conveyed by those terms. The people of these communities call God as Aleklata. Aleklata, it is a superfluous to say that word Alek is derived from the Sanskrit word Alakshya. The Alakshya has become Apabhramsha as Alek, the Alakshya, the unknown and the unknowable. This Alek enters into the mind of a pure man. In other words, it manifests itself through him as Karta, the spiritual teacher. On such a teacher, they bestow the title Saj, the man whose natural tendency lead Godwards. That community is called Karta Bhaja, or worshippers of spiritual teachers, because it is only a human being truly inspired by the mood of the spiritual teacher that is regarded by them as the object of worship. About the real nature of Aleklata and its influence on a pure heart, they say it comes imperceptibly and goes imperceptibly. Nobody can see the Alek. Again, one who has known it is the object of worship in the three worlds. The sign of Sahaja man is that he always remains intact. In other words, he does not lose his serenity on account of lust, even if he be always in the company of woman. They say about him, he lives with woman but never indulges in sexual satisfaction. If an aspirant does not live unattached in the world of lust and gold, he cannot advance spiritually. They therefore teach him, be a cook and distribute the curry, but do not touch the cooking pot, making the frog dance in the mouth of the snake, but let not snake swallow it. Be a cook and distribute the curry, but do not touch the cooking pot. Make the frog dance in the mouth of the snake, but let not the snake swallow it. Bathe in the sea of ambrosia, but do not let your hair be wet. Just as in the tantric, just as in the tantra, the sadhaka have been divided into three classes. The lower one, the animal, the next one, heroic, and the highest, divine. So there are high and low classes of sadhakas amongst the Kartabhajas. They speak of four classes: the alus, the bauls, the darvesas, and the sains. And they say that there is none higher than a sain. The master said, all of them worship the formless aspect of God. He used to sing often a few songs of community, that Kartabhaja community for us. Take for example the song, Dive, O mind, dive deep into the sea of beauty. You will realize the treasure, the gem of love, when you will make a search in the deepest world of your heart. So you all know that song, you have heard it. Dubu 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 rup sagore, doob amar mon. Dive, dive deep, O mind, dive into the deep of beauty. So doob means dive. Doob, 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 rup sagore. So dive, dive, O mind, dive into the beauty, a sea of beauty. You'll realize the treasure, the gem of love, bhakti, when you will make a search in the deepest world of your heart. Search over and over again, and you will realize Vrindavan, not there near Mathura, but in your own heart. You will find Vrindavan in your own heart. That is Lord Krishna residing in your own heart. The lamp of knowledge will constantly burn brightly, illuminating your heart. Who is he? who conducts the boat so easily on land. So, who is he who conducts the boat so easily on land? You can conduct the boat in water, that too with great difficulty. But who is he who is conducting the boat so easily even on the land? So Kubir or Kabira says, listen attentively, meditate on the holy feet of the Guru. Kubira says, listen attentively, meditate on the holy feet of the Guru. So this Ramakrishna used to sing this song of the Karta Bhajas very frequently. You can see in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna also this song mentioned. The master used to tell all of them worship the Karta Bhajas, the formless aspect of God. He used to also sing often a few songs of this community for us. Take for example the song Dive, O Mind, Dive into the Sea of Beauty, Doob, 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 Doob Roop Sagore. Thus, to worship the Guru and remain engaged in congregational devotional exercises are these Karta Bhaja's chief sadhanas. Although they do not disapprove the worship of the images and forms of the deities, they generally do not worship them. The worship of the Guru in India is very, very ancient. It seems to have been prevalent from the age of the Upanishads. For we read in the Taittiriya Upanishad, let the Acharya be your Guru, Acharya Devo Bhava. It appears that worship of the deities was not at all in vogue at the Vedic times. One is astonished to see how many forms Guru worship assumed. One is astonished to see how many forms Guru worshipped assumed in India in course of time. Besides, the aspirants have to undergo various religious practices, exercises in order to renounce from their minds the consciousness of difference such as clean and the unclean, the good and the bad. The master said the aspirants receives instruction regarding those exercises coming down from Guru to disciple. He would now and again mention a few of them also. The master Sri Ramakrishna was often heard to say, the Vedas and the Puranas should be heard by the ear, but the disciplines prescribed by the Tantras should be actually performed and carried into practice. It is seen too almost everywhere in India that the followers of the Smritis practice one or another of the tantric disciplines. Big scholars of the Nyaya and the Vedanta are, it is observed, tantric in practices. Learned scholars of the Vaishnava communities, well versed in devotional scriptures like the Bhagavata, are also seen to follow the secret sadhanas of the communities like the Karta Bhajas. Pandit Vaishnava Charana was one of them. He was following this Karta Bhaja sect. He was intimately connected with their secret congregation at Kanchi Bagan, Kachi Bagan, a few miles of Calcutta. Many men and women of the said community lived there and were engaged in sadhana under his instruction. Vaishnava Charana took the master there on few occasions. Noticing that Sri Ramakrishna was always perfectly unaffected by lust, and seeing that on account of the love of God, he entered into ecstasy which they had never seen before, a few women of that place tried, we were told, to test him in order to know whether he had completely conquered his passions. As a result, they paid him the respect due to one who was intact, sahaja, and naturally disposed towards God. Ramakrishna had completely conquered lust. Lust could not affect him in any way. So the woman, they tested him and they decided he is at a very high state. So they called him the Sahaja. Noticing Sri Ramakrishna was always perfectly unaffected by lust, and seeing that on account of the love of God he entered into ecstasy, which they had never seen before. A few women of that sect or that place tried, we were told, to test Sri Ramakrishna in order to know whether he had completely conquered his passions. As a result, they paid him the respect due to one who was intact and naturally disposed towards God. The ingenious master of innocent course had gone on a trip there with Vaishnava Charan at his request without suspecting anything. He did not know at all that they would test him that way. Be that as it may, he never went there again afterwards. Vaishnava Charan was very much impressed by the master's strength of character, as also by his purity and devotional ecstasy. Consequently, his devotion and reverence for Sri Ramakrishna increased so much day by day that he never hesitated at last to admit in the presence of all that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation of God. Shortly after Vaishnava Charan began visiting Sri Ramakrishna, Pandit Gauri of Indes also came to Dakshineshwar. He was an eminent tantric sadhaka, worshipper of Divine Mother. On his first visit to the Dakshineshwar temple, an amusing event happened. We heard it from the master himself. He said that Gauri had many miraculous power. Gauri Pandita had acquired many miraculous power through his austerities. Whenever he was invited to a scriptural controversy, the argumentation about the scriptures, he entered the house or hall fixed for it with the loud recitation of some verses, like the one from a hymn to the Devi. Helpless that I am, to whom shall I go for shelter except to thee, O mother of Lambodara? Ganesha, having a protruding abdomen, preceded by the startling shouts of certain syllables like Are Re Lambodara Janani, inciting a mood of challenge and heroism, the master said, the hearts of all the scholars, other scholars who were startled with an indescribable fright when they heard from his mouth those syllables expressive of the heroic mood, together with a part of that stanza from the hymn to the Devi by Acharya Shankara, uttered in a voice deep and sonorous like the rumbling of a cloud. Two results were achieved by this. Firstly, by virtue of that sound, the power in Gauri became fully awakened. And secondly, he stole away the strength of the adversaries by startling and charming them with it, loudly uttering that sound and slapping his left arm with the right like the wrestlers. Gauri entered the meeting and sat down with his legs folded and his knees joined together in front and feet behind, in the fashion of the courtiers of the emperors of Delhi, and engaged himself in the controversy. Sri Ramakrishna said that it was then impossible for anyone to defeat him in argumentation. So all the other scholars, because of this miraculous power of Gauri Pandita, they would lose, and Gauri Pandita would always win in the argument. The master had no previous knowledge of that power of Gauri Pandita. Sri Ramakrishna never knew. That was the first time he was meeting Gauri Pandita. And Sri Ramakrishna also never knew that miraculous power which Gauri had. But as soon as Gauri Pandita entered Dakshineshwar Kali temple and uttered the syllabus Ha Re Re Bam Bam Lambodara Janani, and that syllables were uttered, Sri Ramakrishna felt prompted by someone from within him to exclaim those very syllables more loudly than Gauri Pandita. Sri Ramakrishna could utter the same mantra more loudly than him. Thereupon Gauri repeated the syllabus again in a louder voice than Sri Ramakrishna. Excited at that, Sri Ramakrishna uttered Hare Re Bam Bam Lambodara Janani, the mantra, more loudly than the Gauri Pandita again. The master used to say smilingly that a terrific uproar was created in Dakshineshwar temple at that time, like the din made during the inroads by the dacoits, on account of the louder and yet louder utterances of those syllables by both the sides, with sticks, cudgels, etc. The security of Dakshineshwar temple thought some dacoits or some army has come to invade. Hearing the sounds of these two Pandits, Gauri Pandita and Sri Ramakrishna, they thought some dacoits have come to attack. So they came with the arms and ammunitions to protect the temple. So with sticks and cudgels, etc., the gatekeepers of Kali temple ran hurriedly towards the place from where the noise came. All others were besides themselves with fear. The noise of this vocal contest subsided only when Gauri Pandita could not raise his voice anymore more than Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna won in that competition. Now Gauri Pandita himself was to be silenced now. In somewhat dejected mood, he then entered Kali temple, laughing loudly to cover his defeat. The master said, the Divine Mother afterwards revealed to me the great secret of Gauri's life, the way in which he disarmed his opponent. So Divine Mother, who lived in Sri Ramakrishna, gave him the secret of Gauri Pandita, because Gauri Pandita was a devotee of Divine Mother only. He knew this mantra, he got the miraculous power from the Divine Mother. So the Divine Mother herself revealed all that secret to Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna knew all about Gauri Pandita even earlier. So the Divine Mother afterwards revealed to me the great secret of Gauri's life, the way in which he disarmed his opponents of all their powers and himself became victorious, invincible in any argument. It was also revealed that he would no longer have the power. After coming to Sri Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna defeated him in that competition of telling the mantra in a higher, louder voice, after that power, the miraculous power of Gauri Pandita was absorbed into Sri Ramakrishna's divine person. It was also revealed that he would no longer have the power. The mother, the Divine Mother in the body of Sri Ramakrishna attracted that power here, that is into Ramakrishna's body for his own good. Why? Because with that power, Gauri Pandita could not move forward in spiritual life. So the Divine Mother absorbed all those miraculous power into the body of Sri Ramakrishna so that he could progress forward in spiritual life and realize God. The mother attracted the power of Gauri Pandita here. That is, Ramakrishna would not tell his body, I or this body, he used to tell here into his body for his good. And it was seen that day by day, Gauri Pandita was more and more charmed by the ideal of Sri Ramakrishna and became completely obedient to Sri Ramakrishna. Pandit Gauri was, we have already said, a tantric sadhaka. At the time of worship of Durga every year, this Gauri Pandita, we were told by Sri Ramakrishna, made all preparations for the worship, adorned his wife, his own wife, Gauri Pandita adorned his own wife with dress and ornaments, seated her on the wooden seat decorated with alimpana for 3 days, and for 3 days devotedly worshipped her as the Divine Mother herself. We all think that Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Sharda Devi, but even before that we can see Gauri Pandita during the Durga Puja for 3 days would worship his own wife as the Divine Mother. So Gauri Pandita during the Durga Puja were told by Sri Ramakrishna himself, made all preparations for the worship, adorned his wife with dress and ornaments, seated her on the wooden seat decorated with alimpana, and for 3 days devotedly worshipped his wife as the Divine Mother herself. The Tantra teaches that all the female figures are the forms of the Divine Mother of the universe, and that there is a great manifestation in them of the Divine Mother's power sustaining and delighting the Jivas. Man should therefore worship all female forms with absolute purity of outlook, forgetting that the Divine Mother herself stands veiled in female figures and looking upon female bodies with a feeling of lust as if they were objects of enjoyment only. One insults the Mother of the universe herself and consequently meets with endless ruin. In the Chandi, the second chapter, 6th verse, the gods recite the hymn to Devi. Vidya samasta tava devi bheda striyaha samastaha sakala jagatsu vayaikaya purita mamba maitat kate stutihi stavya paraparoktihi. What is the meaning of this verse of the Chandi? O Devi, the Divine Mother, thou art of the nature of pure consciousness. That is, you are the Parabrahma Swarupa, pure consciousness. Again, thou art manifested in all various sciences, high and low, from which endless forms of conceptual knowledge arise. Thou existest as all the female figures of the world. Thou existest as all the female figures of the world. Striyaha samasta sakala jagatsu. Thou existest as all the female figures of the world. Thou alone pervadest the whole universe and art present everywhere in it. Thou art incomparable and beyond words. Whoever has been able or will be able to describe thy numberless noble qualities by reciting hymn to thee. Many of us read this hymn daily in India, but alas, how few of us try to look upon the female figure as the Divine Mother herself, pay it due respect even for a few moments, and thus feel pure joy in our heart and feel blessed? How few are those who do not insult the Divine Mother of the universe hundreds of times every day? O India, you are in the present miserable condition. Note what Shardanandaji Maharaj, the great soul, the direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, is warning us, is telling, O India, that is Hindus and all the Indians, you are in this present miserable condition. Why are the Indians going down? They went down, were defeated by the British and all other Muslim invaders, and they went to such a miserable condition. He is declaring, O India, you are in this present miserable condition only because you insult female forms with your bestial attitude and have forgotten to serve Jiva, the living being, as Shiva. The Mother of the universe alone knows when she will have compassion on you and remove the bestial mood of yours. We have heard from Sri Ramakrishna himself of another wonderful power of Pandit Gauri. What was the other special power which Gauri Pandita had? The eminent tantric sadhakas generally perform Havan, Homa, at the end of the daily worship of the Universal Mother. Again, I will read it. We have heard from Sri Ramakrishna himself another wonderful, miraculous power of Gauri Pandita. What is that? The eminent tantric sadhakas generally perform Havan or Homa at the end of the daily worship of the Universal Mother. Gauri Pandita also performed it on many occasions, if not daily. But the procedure he adopted to perform the Havan was very, very special and peculiar. What was that? But the procedure Gauri Pandita adopted in his Homa or Havan was very strange. Please don't try in your house. He did not perform it like others. Usually people make an altar on the ground by means of bricks and sand, arrange pieces of firewood on it, and then kindle fire and offer oblations. But Gauri Pandita stretched his own left arm. He would not keep all that havan and other things, the firewood and everything on the ground in that brick Havanakunda or the metallic Havanakunda. He kept all that is to be done on his left hand like this. He would stretch the left hand. On his left hand, he arranged all the things for Havan, the firewood and everything. So Gauri Pandita stretched his own left arm without any support and placed it on one mound. What is one mound? The measurement of weight in Indian standard is about 82 pounds. Can you imagine? 82 pounds is divided by this thing to make it kgs. It is somewhere 35 kgs or so. 82 pounds. One mound of firewood. 82 pounds of firewood on his left hand at a time. Lighted that fire on the left hand to that firewood on his own hand, and he offered oblation into that fire with his right hand. So he would light the fire on his left hand, and in that left hand he used to have fire, the firewood measuring one mound, that is 82 pounds. The weight on one hand and the fire also on the left hand, and used to put the ghee to the fire and all the other objects just like we do in the Homa, and used to perform with the right hand. So this was narrated by none other than Sri Ramakrishna himself. So Gauri Pandita stretched, he had another miraculous power. He stretched his own left arm without any support and placed it on the hand, the left hand, one mound, that is 82 pounds of firewood at a time, and lighted it with fire and offered oblations into it with his right hand. It is not a short time that Homa takes. The performance of Homa takes more than 1 hour. So he used to do all that Homa, Havan on the fire burning of the 82 pounds firewood on his left hand. So it appears to us to be quite impossible for one to sustain the heavy weight of 82 pounds, one mound of firewood on the arms stretched in the air, and devoutly offer oblations in the prescribed way for such a long time, keeping the mind calm and bearing the heat of that fire on the arm all the while. That is why many of us could not at first believe in that feat, even when we heard it from Sri Ramakrishna himself. Sharadanandaji Maharaj and other young disciples who were well educated in the Western standard, they could first not believe it when Sri Ramakrishna himself told it. The master understood our difficulty and said, I saw him do it with my own eyes. I saw Gauri Pandit doing this Havan in this manner with my own eyes. That was also one of his miraculous powers. That was also one of the miraculous powers of Gauri Pandita. So now we will end our discussion on the great master, especially the Vaishnava Charana and Gauri for today, because it's already 8 o'clock. And since it is Sunday, you can spend more time in some question and answer session if you have any doubts or anything. It's a time now for question and answer. It's already 8 o'clock. If you have any questions, if you have any doubts, you can ask now. So Pavan Kumar has given that 82 pounds is 37 kgs. Yeah, I was somewhere near. I thought 35 kgs. So he has exactly given it is 37 kgs. One mound is 82 pounds. Pavan Kumar has searched it and given it as exactly 37 kgs. That's very good. Thank you, Pawan Kumar.
Good question.
Pardon, I can't hear. The voice is low.
Maharaj, the Vaishnava sects, you mentioned that they had a separate rituals. Like, how different was it compared to the other mainstream Hindu rituals?
No, that was all secret things. The Karta Bhajas was a sect in the Vaishnava, this thing. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followers there. That had come from the Tantras or the Buddhistic practices. It was explained. That's why Shardanandaji Maharaj took so much of time to explain how did it start, how did the Tantra develop, and what was the reason. Earlier, the Vedic thing gave the chances for both yoga and bhoga, and how Buddhism, the sannyasins or the teachers of Buddhism, they forced upon the higher ascetic practices on everybody, and that was the result of the downfall at that time, and how such secret practices came up. So this was the offshoot of one of such things. That's all that was
More towards the
explained.
negative side?
Yeah,
Is it more
negative
towards
side.
negative?
Yeah, it would be. That's why Ramakrishna told about that. He went there without knowing, and after that, when they tried to test him, he came out of the test completely this thing without any failure, because he had that complete control over the lust and all the passions, and he never went after that. So Shardanandaji explained about that Karta Bhaja sect in detail.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other doubts? Okay. If you don't have any questions or doubts.
Maharaj,
Yes, Madhu.
Maharaj, Ramanujacharya, was he the follower also of Vaishnava practices?
Ramanujacharya was the one of the main propounder of the Vishishtadvaita Vaishnava group. See, amongst the Vedantic this thing, there are three things, that is Dvaita, Advaita and Vishishtadvaita. So Dvaitins, the Dvaita group, there are so many acharyas. So like Madhvacharya, Vallabhacharya, they have their different things. If you go to Rajasthan and Gujarat, that area, there are the Vallabhacharya. So many other acharyas have come and they have propounded. They are not so popular. But the main things are Dvaita by Madhvacharya, which is a big following. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, though his is also Dvaita, he took the philosophy of Madhvacharya. Then later on, they developed their own sect. That is now at present one of the sect out of the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is our ISKCON, International Krishna Consciousness. That is called the Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Gauda Desha means the Bengal also has another name called Gauda Desha. Gauda means Bengal. So that is called Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So that also follows Madhvacharya's Dvaita philosophy, but they gave a twist, their own twist also. So it is separately recognized as Gauda Vaishnavism, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the Vishishtadvaita is, we are also Advaitins, but God is not Nirakara, it is Sakara, that is Narayana or Vishnu. He is alone, he is one, but the nature and the jivas are a part of his. So ours is Advaita only, God is alone existing, all the other things are his part. So Vishishta Advaita. That philosophy had the seeds and coming up, developing past many years. It can be seen the source in Vedas too. But the main propounder, the main person, Guru, is Ramanujacharya amongst that sect. After Ramanujacharya preaching that Vishishtadvaita everywhere, all over India, some people in India took it up and they forgot that it was the origin was Ramanujacharya or the Vishishtadvaita. They gave a different turn to it. That is it is called Ramayata sadhus. If you go to North India, you can see in Ayodhya and all other areas, sadhus having big nama, just like the Sri Vaishnavas. But they have forgotten the origin of the Vishishtadvaita philosophy of Ramanujacharya. They have their own sect there that is called Ramayata sadhu. So like that, it went on uh, taking its own form. So Ramanujacharya is the main and chief propounder. But even before Ramanujacharya, that Vishishtadvaita was there, and it can be traced back to old Vedic thing also. So you cannot tell that one person founded anything. It was already there. Shankaracharya didn't find the Advaita system. He was one of the great Advaitic teacher. That's all. Earlier also there were so many other great teachers.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
On Swamiji, Colin.
Om Colin Shetty ji, please tell.
Swamiji, it seems to me as though uh, Buddhism had actually emanated from Hinduism, but
Yeah.
seems to have had quite an influence on the various different offshoots that various different people are practicing. And some of them at the moment seem like a negative offshoot.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is that my perception? Is that correct?
As we have already seen, studied Shardananda Kitab, when the Buddhist acharyas at that time, the highest teaching of Buddha were meant for the highest monks and ascetics. They tried to force that upon every ordinary people. Ordinary people have to be given the chance to enjoy this world and gradually lift them from the lower aspect to the higher aspect. That's why Hinduism in Vedas, they were given all those opportunities to go up step by step. But suddenly they suppressed everything. They destroyed all the teachings of Vedas, and they started giving the highest ascetic sannyasins, truth and other things practices to the people. That's why during Buddhism itself it got divided. Earlier that was meant for the teachings and other things meant for the higher ascetics and sannyasins. So it was divided as Hinayana and Mahayana. The first division was Hinayana and Mahayana. Hina means very small, Yana means boat or a ship. The small boat or the ship which can carry only little people, that is called Hinayana, Buddhism. Mahayana means big ship which can carry many people. So common people can go with that only. So in that Mahayana, you can see so many yanas, Vajrayana from the Tibet, and so many different things you can see. So it itself got divided because it couldn't be practiced by common people, the highest ascetic teachings. So those people who could do that, they can do it. Otherwise, now the Mahayana came up. Then after that, Vajrayana, so many other yanas you can see coming up. Then hodgepodge was created and confusion was there. There was total confusion. So in the morning times, there would be all that highest practices. Then stealthily, they started doing all these other practices, taking from Hinduism and other things. That is the origin of tantras. So all the other practices you can see in Buddhism and other things, that was the offshoot of all those things. Vajrayana, you can see in Tibetan, this thing, there is the worship of Tara, of this mantra, Om, everything going on there. If you go to Vajrayana, study that in Tibet, you can find it out yourself.
Thank you, Swami. Because one of the things that we see is that King Varma the third or the fourth, he built quite a big temple out in Cambodia, I think it was, and this temple was then all the lingas were replaced with Buddhist Buddha statues. Then these were then again replaced with the linga, and so it seemed like there was a lot of turmoil during those times.
Yeah, it went on changing. Things would change at the time. That's why Swami Vivekananda calls Buddhism as a rebel child of Hinduism.
Okay.
Swami Vivekananda used to call Hinduism as a rebel child. So many acharyas, so many saints, they came up. They would, if there were any practices and other things, when there were degradation in Hinduism, as usual, people who can't follow, weak-minded, they bring down the ideal. At the time such saints came, they showed it was wrong and they corrected, and Hinduism would correct, and that sect or whatever the teachings would go away. For example, Buddhism came to rectify Hinduism at the time, which had some wrong, this thing coming down or degradation. So Hinduism is so vast and so liberal that it makes all the correction immediately. Once the correction is done, what is there for Buddhism to do for Hinduism now? So it went out. It had to go out of India. Yeah, because it had something new to give to other countries. It stood there, but it didn't have anything new to give to Hinduism. Hinduism had all the things there. So it was absorbed into Hinduism. Once it is corrected, see now, anytime any person, any saint comes and tells, the speciality of Hinduism is they will correct themselves and again come back. So they will absorb that everything. So Hinduism stays as Hinduism. But Buddhism, which came to correct Hinduism, it corrected. Once the work is done, there is no place for Buddhism there in India. It got absorbed. That is the speciality of Hinduism. It absorbs everything. Anybody, any saints come and gives the correction, it will accept it. For example, you see, Jesus Christ came and gave the correction to Jews. He told these are all the wrong things. They got angry. They persecuted him. They nailed him to the cross. All the prophets in other Semitic religions, they were all persecuted. They were killed. Why? Because they told, see, these are the wrong practices you are doing, please correct. They would not correct, they would kill them. But it never happened in India. Anybody, any saint comes and shows any correction, they will accept it with great large-heartedness and absorb everything. Let truths come from every direction. That is the speciality of Hinduism.
Thank you, Swami.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
Jesus Christ could not handle the being nailed on the cross, but yet Gauri Pandita could hold one mound of fire in his left arm alone.
Yeah.
Thanks, Swami.
Oh, oh. So no more questions? Are there no more doubts?
Maharaj, one clarification.
Please, Pawan.
Yeah. Maharaj, so Shadaranji is telling this all example of these other practices. So that means that any practice whose end goal is to get material possession, so those practices will eventually have a downfall. Is that correct? Is that the lesson?
Not a downfall. Already we are at that level. We might have progressed up to some extent. Then if we don't know the truth and the reality behind all these spiritual practices, then we will have a downfall. So what is the aim? Aim is that one undivided God, Advaita. Gradually we have to give up all these sensual enjoyments and step by step move forward. So all these religious practices have been done, giving us little opportunity to enjoy the world, the bhoga, then purifying our mind, then coming up and finally giving up everything for the sake of God. That is the highest. So when we have the weak mind, what we do is we will try to, just like the devil quoting the scriptures, we will take so many things from the scriptures. See, these people have told that people, they can't understand what is the significance of that. That's why Shraddhanandaji Maharaj is showing everything in detail and telling everywhere, everything. These are the truths. These are the things. So do not confuse and wrongly quote these things and go to ruin. So he's showing us what is the right thing. So now there are less chances of falling. Otherwise, we are in a state of confusion. Now they are making it clear. Ramakrishna or Sharadanandaji or Swami Vivekananda, they give the scientific basis of all these things and show us how the history of religion has come over from thousands and thousands of years. So if we understand it, there will be clarity and we will know what our religion is. So that's why they are giving in detail every practices, everything which came up in India.
It's clear, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Then shall we now close our session with a prayer? You don't have any other questions? Okay. Om Priyatam Pundarikakshaha Sarvayagneshwaro Harihi Tasmin Tushte Jagat Tushtam Prenite Prenitam Jagat Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.